Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So before the Season of the Deep begins and we all move on, let's go ahead and just recap the story from the Season of Defiance and Lightfall. On reflection, yeah, this is a rough video to make because, well, you know. Anyway, the recap of everything is really here as a service for those of you who have requested it, and as per usual, it's something that allows you to get up to speed if you're trying to get ready for a future season and you just need to know the events of Lightfall and this last season. So, let's start with Lightfall. Thanks to what we learned at the end of the Season of the Seraph, we know that the Witness was specifically searching for an artifact of darkness known as the Veil. What is the Veil is a question that is never actually properly answered in the Lightfall campaign, but I've got a few hours worth of speculative content talking about what the Veil is/does across the whole channel. I'm starting with this particular point because the campaign mentions the Veil constantly. It's got to be easily 24 times or so. And yeah, no concrete explanation of what it is ever given. The extensive research from the community has told us a lot of potential stuff about the Veil, but it's all speculative, and very few things have actually been confirmed by anything that we've read in-game. So for the moment, I want you to know that above all things, but here are 3 important facts about the Veil that we know definitively. Firstly, it's an artifact of darkness. Secondly, it reveals the Web of Strand as one gets closer to it. And thirdly, the Heart of the Black Garden was an imperfect copy of it. Now, there are a whole bunch of other things about how it's potentially a repository for all the memories of the cosmos, and even more stuff that links it to cosmic fungi, but for the moment I want to set all of that aside because that's all theory. Solid and really compelling theory, but theory nonetheless. This is all worth remembering for the future, but for now, that's what we know, and it matters because, well, the Veil is the Witness's entire objective in the Lightfall campaign. To find the Veil and link with it. And why? Because reasons, I don't know. They don't explain that either. Anyway, to start off in Lightfall's campaign, there is a massive assault on Earth. The forces of the Lost City and the Coalition are taking on the conventional forces of Calus's Shadow Legion, who have joined the Witness in battle, but they clearly have no way of damaging the Pyramid Fleet of the Witness itself, or the Witness. This proves to be a problem as the Witness moved from its pyramid ship to make contact with the Traveler. Even as the Traveler made some kind of assault on the Witness, it was one of these moments at which the Witness was just completely unfazed and continued onwards as it always does, and an initial moment of contact with the Traveler is made. For this brief moment, the Witness seemed to learn that the Veil was on Neptune. With that established, it sent Emperor Calus, its newest disciple, to go and retrieve the Veil. Osiris, who had been hot on the heels of this mystery since his revival at the end of the Season of the Plunder, immediately gave chase, followed swiftly by us. From this moment on, without really knowing what it was, everything piles down into being just a big race to see who can get to the Veil first. We start off that race well enough by sabotaging 2 Shadow Legion ships in orbit of Neptune before having to take a Cabal drop pod down to the surface. During this mission, we also see Calus's massive ship, the Typhon Imperator, making its way to Neptune's surface, and we have our first run-in with the Tormentors. When we touch down on Neptune, we discover the city of Neomuna, a bastion of humanity that has existed on Neptune since the collapse and has remained hidden ever since. Within mere moments, we're also greeted by the city's protectors, the Cloud Striders Rohan and Nimbus. After fighting our way through some of this Shadow Legion, we eventually manage to find Osiris's drop pod, which is stuck on a nearby roof. It's at this moment that we also discovered something else, a strange force at the heart of Lightfall's story, Strand. Strand is a darkness element that we discover fresh here on Neomuna, and it has no link to the Witness, unlike Stasis. It's rooted in the ideas of memory, consciousness, and the ties of fate that bind us all together. After using Strand for a bit, we're hit with a wave of exhaustion, the first of many as we experiment with Strand. This gives Nimbus and Rohan time to save Osiris from a tormentor. Our job was then to get to the Veil enclosure before Calus's forces. We made acquaintances at very least, with our new Cloudstrider friends and went on our way. And on our way there, we encountered powerful suppressor technology which prevented us from using our powers. In spite of that, we still worked our way through a sizable Cabal force, but the delay that they brought was enough for the rest of Callus's Shadow Legion to claim the Urkala complex, the Vale containment building. They would then need time to break through it, but the first gambit had been won by Callus and his forces. It's at this moment that something strange happens, something which may not have been entirely intentional. Our ghost was overridden by the Witness, and it seems as though we accidentally intercepted a communication between it and Emperor Callus. During this, we overheard that Callus needed to connect something called the Radial Mast to the Vale. The Radial Mast, by the way, isn't explained clearly either in the story. The only thing that is clear is that it's filled with light. We found out as much when we invaded Callus's ship, the Typhon Imperator, in an attempt to destroy the Radial Mast. We failed in this endeavor as its shielding was too tough to crack, and we had not yet mastered Strand, the only force that seemed capable of penetrating it. And we only really escaped the Emperor's ship thanks to the intervention of Empress Keitel. Having failed to destroy the Radial Mast and having failed to stop Callus from claiming the Urkala complex, we were redirected by the Cloudstriders to defend some of the important infrastructure of Neomuna, namely the Cloud Ark. The Cloud Ark is talked about a lot, and it's somehow explained just a little bit better than the other elements of the story. It's a kind of digital second space, one where you can virtually exist alongside the other citizens of Neomuna, a sort of secondary reality, something that you would experience if you were looking at augmented reality, something that you could fully immerse yourself in. However, this is something which all of the citizens of Neomuna were plugged into given the state of war in the city, and should the Cloud Ark fall, it would kill any citizen connected to it, and therefore it was worth protecting. In the process of protecting it, we also learned a little bit more about the nature of Strand. Following on from this, that mastery of Strand took a center stage in the story, and Osiris and Nimbus helped us to master the first few elements of Strand that we could truly control, our first aspect. We made some significant progress, but we wouldn't reach the point at which we weren't suffering the effects of exhaustion, and that would be rather critical. After this, we would be forced into another confrontation with the Shadow Legion as the Radial Mast was being moved to the site of the Vale. We would need to destroy the Radial Mast to prevent a link from being established, and to stop the Witness. Ultimately, despite working our way through some of Callus's most powerful forces, we failed. Succumbing to the same exhaustion as we had before, we lost a critical moment to destroy the Radial Mast, and with our failure, Rohan was forced to give his own life in order to stop Callus. After Rohan's death, we realized that we would need to properly master Strand to defeat Callus, and so we went and trained more until we mastered it properly. After learning to truly embrace the power of Strand, instead of simply controlling it, which was the cause of our exhaustion, we were thrown rapidly into our final confrontation with the Emperor. Callus was moving to capture the Vale directly as the Witness had run out of patience. After briefly recapturing the outer defenses of the Vale and even repelling some of Callus's forces, we were driven back and had to flee deep into the complex itself to find the Vale before Callus did. Empress Keitel bought us what time she could, but even she wasn't enough to stop her father. Beneath us, we would find an ancient relic of darkness within the Vale containment, something which was odd because, as Ghost noted, it was far less ominous than what we had initially suspected. This, however, was nothing that would stop Callus from confronting us, and we would eventually defeat him here under the Vale itself. Upon clearing the room and reuniting with our allies, including Nimbus and Keitel, our ghost was possessed, and even as Osiris warned us to get our ghost out of there, the Witness took control of it. A thing of light seemingly was close enough to the Vale, a thing of darkness, and a massive burst of energy was released from the Vale. We did not have the nerve to shoot and kill our ghost in time to stop this. The massive burst of energy connected with the Traveler. and the energy burst would then allow the Witness to access it fully. We don't know exactly what happened, but we do know that the Witness created a portal and that it took its fleet and itself through that portal. From here, it seems pretty clear that we lost, but the stakes weren't very well explained. The Traveler still hangs in the sky, and Guardians can still use the light. Something isn't quite right, but by that same token, things continue turning. The whole story of Lightfall is confusing, and it gets a lot of questions out there, but really doesn't answer many of them. You've heard it all before, you don't need me to go over it here. I was one of the first people that said this and gave feedback. Regardless, it's one of those moments at which this is your recap, that's where the story is, and if you want to understand some more things about, well, the Veil in particular, I would ask you to check my more contemporary content, especially if you're in a future season. And the reason for that is because with Season of the Deep, we have a quest that more thoroughly explains the Veil. We'll see more about that, and finally we may get some answers for it, but for the moment, at this recap, we don't know much. Of course, Lightfall's story continued in the post-campaign content, and a bunch of stuff happened. Thanks to the post-campaign exotic quests, we learned more about the Veil and how the Heart of the Black Garden was actually a failed copy of it. We learned about the nature of Strand. We fought off the Vex in Neomuna, and we found a strange series of whispers throughout the city. It turns out that these whispers belonged to Nezarec, who had been awakened on the pyramid ship of the Witness thanks to the Traveler's assault. Something had pierced the grave-like containment unit that held the remains of Nezarec, and his body had begun to regrow. We were then directed to invade the pyramid ship, partly by Guardian orders, I'm assuming, and partly because Nezarec invited us with his whispers practically. He even says as much when we land on board the ship. This is the basis for the Root of Nightmares raid, and it gave us an opportunity to grow the thing that the Traveler had planted in the pyramid ship of the Witness, a tree of silver wings. As we grew the tree, we also regrew Nezarec's body. It seems as though Nezarec was feeding off of the energy that the tree was radiating, given that one of its roots had pierced his chamber. When eventually we faced the final god of pain, he was fully regrown, having given himself new limbs and a whole new lease on life, having drunk in both darkness and light. We did defeat him, but the lore and Nezarec's final words make it somewhat clear that his influence is very far-reaching, and that we shouldn't expect this to be the last we hear of him. Most consequentially, of all, for our purposes of leading on to the next season though, there is the story of the Cloudstriders and their greatest secret. As it turns out, they were hiding something at the heart of the Cloud Ark. By reconstructing their broken monuments, we began to learn that they were hiding something deep in the network architecture of the Cloud Ark. As we dug further, we learned that this hidden thing was based on Vex code, and that the Vex of Neomuna were trying to rescue it from the Cloud Ark, hence their increased aggression. It turns out that this thing was an AI programmed and created by the Ishtar Collective, an AI known as Soteria. Some of you may remember that Soteria is the AI found in the Spire of the Watcher dungeon. She is also known as the Orgamind, an AI based partly on Vex code that has a degree of clairvoyance and clarity that allows her to accurately predict the future. She was saved from the Vex that were trying to extract her from the Cloud Ark, and she thanked us. She also warned us that there was an enemy of the Witness on Titan and that they had critical intelligence. This is clearly what would lead us to the Season of the Deep, where we would be going to Titan after hearing the communications from Deputy Commander Sloan. What we'll find in the Season of the Deep is at this exact moment of recording still unknown. Speaking of seasons though, what happened in the Season of Defiance? Well, the season started off with the aftermath of the Witness's invasion. The Witness and the Shadow Legion were kidnapping people and taking them to massive prison complexes set up across Earth, from the Cosmodrome to the European Dead Zone. Our mission was simple: free the people who had been captured. We did this with the assistance of Mara Sov, who would open gateways into the Ascendant Realm for us, allowing us to bypass the pyramid prison defenses. We would be joined in this endeavor by a variety of coalition forces, from the Elixni, Reef, Guardian Orders, and forces of the city. These various warriors who joined forces with us would come to be anointed as Mara's Queen's Guard. In particular, these figures would include ourselves, Amanda Holliday, Devrim Kay, the Crow, and Mithrax of the House of Light. As time went on, we would continue to liberate people from various pyramid facilities, and even to fight the Shadow Legion in space as they moved their operations to an orbiting command vessel. At a certain point in time, we found an opportunity to liberate more people from the Shadow Legion, and as our mission in the EDZ commenced, we were contacted by Aramis, who warned us that the facility was a trap laid specifically for us. Not trusting Aramis, we charged on ahead, with ourselves, Amanda Holliday, and Mithrax making short work of the enemy and working to free the prisoners. However, as it turned out, Aramis was correct about this particular facility's function. Amanda Holliday bought time to allow the prisoners and Mithrax to escape, but ultimately had to give her own life in the process. Mithrax too nearly perished, but was saved by Aramis, calling into question her loyalties to the Witness, and giving us an interesting future story where we might potentially see the Kell of the House of Darkness switch sides. Everyone would be changed by the passing of Amanda Holliday, from Zavala to Crow to Mara to Mithrax. Eventually, Crow would plan a retaliatory strike and we would take out the Shadow Legion command ship over Earth in retribution, scuttling a large portion of their fleet. However, Zavala would still lament the loss of his close friend, and would curse the Traveler's name for being silent as always, in a time of great need. The last bit of story from the Season of Defiance revolves around Asher Mir. We saw him throughout the Vex network, and in particular we saw him in the Avalon mission. Avalon was the Vex node that Asher Mir had been trapped within, and the Vex were hunting him in an attempt to purge him from their network. Asher originally went into the Vex network in order to research the Veil and the Pyramid Fleet and potentially a solution to stopping the Witness. His research bore some fruit, which he would allow us to uncover as we further investigated the secrets of the network. In order to help do this, he would give us a powerful weapon created of the Vex network. We would call it the Vexcalibur, and Mithrax was determined after this not only to recover the data that Asher Mir had so painstakingly sifted through, manually working through millions of simulations to collect, but also to save Asher Mir himself. However, later on it would become clear that Asher thought that the situation ahead of us, facing off against the Witness, was hopeless, and at the same time was discovered and overwhelmed and consumed by the Vex network. And so that is everything that happened in the Season of Defiance and Lightfall. A brief recap, but hopefully it's gotten you all up to speed and ready for future seasonal content. If you enjoyed the video or you found it useful, go ahead and leave a like, and if you want more Destiny lore content, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. Of course, if you have any thoughts of your own, go ahead and leave them in the comments section. What do you think is going to happen in the Season of the Deep? I mean, it's obvious what's going on from the Soteria mission, but do you reckon there's any further context? For those of you who don't know, go ahead and read the Last Days on Kraken Mare lore book. It might give you a little bit of a sneak peek as to what's going on in the season. But, as per usual, know that your viewership, as always, is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Perodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.